that I like to do. All these questions are just posted under a post where I asked for them, and I don't look at the questions first. So this is all just my thoughts on them as they come. So let's go ahead and dive in this week. Question number one from my good ex-buddy Darren Vest. Have you ever had to deal with bicep pain, possibly tendinitis from low bar squatting? If so, what was the workaround? Now, the answer to this question on how to deal with bicep pain from low bar squatting is largely to just avoid it to begin with. A lot of the times, bicep pain from low bar squats is going to come from a few different things. Improper grip, number one, improper bar position, number two, and then overuse. So one of the most common things to check for is making sure that the bar position is in the right place. So when I first started low bar squatting back in the day, it was like I thought low bar meant as low of a bar position as possible. So I actually had it too far down on my back to where my elbows had to get cranked up pretty high to even hold the bar on. Now I was young, dumb, and flexible enough that I was okay with it, and I got away with it for a really long time. The only time it ever actually flared up was when I did a 20 rep squat program and did 10 or 12 weeks of progressively heavier 20 rep squats. And by the end of it, I had terrible bicep tendinitis. My shoulders were just beat to shit. And I'm not actually sure if I've ever really fully recovered from that. So making sure that the bar position is in the right place, and then having your grip width on the bar in the correct spot as well. It can be very easy to flare things up if you're too narrow. It can be, or if you're too wide, or if your wrist is cocked back. But the bar position just below the spine of the scapula is number one, not having it too low. Number two, you can prevent it by, in that grip and that setup, you shelving your back and having the bar in the right position and the correct grip width. Make sure as you're squatting to never carry any load in your hands and in your elbows and in your arms. You want the full weight of the bar across your back. If you can feel yourself holding the weight in your arms, you know that something is likely incorrect. The third is overuse. So if you're doing the starting strength NLP and you've been squatting, specifically low bar squatting, 3 times a week, for months on end. Some guys I've talked to have been doing that for years on end, where they've low bar squat. And regardless of if the bar position is correct, and regardless of if the grip is correct, these things will start flaring up. And most of the time, once you've done that for long enough, the best way to mitigate it is to start introducing other squat variations. It's okay to start high bar squatting. It's okay to use a Mars bar once a week. It's okay to start learning the front squat and things like that. So mostly it's a bar position issue, it's a grip issue, and then it's kind of a frequency issue. Not a lot of guys can get away with heavy low bar squats multiple times a week for a really long time without running into some sort of shoulder, bicep, elbow issue. Okay, so let's go ahead and just start there. Now, as for actually managing it after the fact, again, you're usually going to have to go to a high bar, Mars bar, to get the inflammation away if the technique stuff that you're doing from a grip and bar position standpoint isn't working. Okay, so I joked with Darren under this question, this could be a whole 30-minute video in itself breaking it down, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of direction. Now, number 2, how to improve balance in the squat. Most advice I see seems a bit tautological, like improve balance, keep bar mid-foot, without much practical advice on how to actually do that. 6'4" lifter with long flamingo legs, constantly struggling to hit depth. So with the balance, I think a lot of people make this mistake. Number one is you have to actually establish what midfoot balance feels like. Okay. A lot of people get too far into their heels or they get too far onto the balls of their feet. You need to understand what that midfoot position feels like. And to do that, all it really takes is you standing there, taking your squat stance, and then rocking some weight back onto your heels, rocking some weight back onto your toes, and then you find that middle ground and grab your feet into it. And that's the midfoot balance. Now, the next part, and if you're struggling with depth and you're tall, and you use the words in this question, keep the bar over the midfoot. Now, here's the thing. It's not actually the barbell until you get to significantly heavy weights that's balanced over the midfoot. It is the combined center of mass of you and the barbell together that needs to be balanced over the midfoot. So while you're squatting, you have to think about the entire balance of you and the system being balanced over the midfoot. It's not the barbell itself. Because with light weights, the barbell is actually going to track forward of the midfoot. So if you're sitting there trying to keep the bar and like you're filming yourself from the side and you're trying to keep the bar directly over the midfoot when it's just the empty bar or it's light weights, you're going to just pound yourself into oblivion trying to do it because it's impossible. So you need to think, I need to establish my midfoot position. I need to know what that's like. And then when you're squatting, you want to keep your combined balance of you and the bar. And again, that changes as the weights go up over the midfoot. It's not the barbell itself. And I'm willing to bet that'll help your depth problems. Because if you're trying to find that midfoot, if you're trying to keep the bar tracking over the midfoot, that means your weight's going to be shifted too far back, most likely, at the beginning. And if your weight is shifted back on your heels, it's really hard to squat to depth. And it's even harder when you have long-ass flamingo legs. I know this from experience. So the goal here is if you're struggling with that, just make sure that you are balancing your entire weight over the midfoot the entire rep. It's not the barbell itself. That's a really, really fucking important point to squatting properly too. Dive into the blue book so you understand. We talk about the bar being over the midfoot, but it's actually the combined center of mass of you and the barbell. And the heavier that weight is, the higher that your center of mass gets towards the bar. So if you're squatting 405 for 5, it's probably going to look like the bar's tracking right over the midfoot. But if you're squatting 135 for 5, most people, that bar is going to be well forward of the midfoot because that combined center of mass is going to be lower, right? Without going too much into the physics of it, your center of mass is more towards your pelvis when you're unloaded. And then the heavier the weight is, the more your center of mass tracks up forward towards the bar. So again, there's an entire blue book that you can get for like $24.99 on Amazon from the Asgard company, and you can read all about that. Okay. I'd love to hear general guidelines for what to expect on the 4 lifts when training teenage girls. Been lifting with my daughters, and it's not quite the same as what my experience was, obviously. First off, they're not going to recover quite like a male would with a bunch of testosterone. You're going to have to take the progression way slower. We're talking where you start with, a lot of men squat like 135 on day 1 and things like that. You have to start young women in a very low stage. I'm talking, I'll use a 15-pound bar with them, get them used to the movement patterns, get them used to moving well, and then progress them up from there. And then basically think about this. Your 10-pound jumps are their 5-pound jumps, and your 5-pound jumps are their 2.5-pound jumps, and their 2.5-pound and your 2.5-pound jumps are their 1-pound jumps. So you have to get ahead of that early. I think one of the biggest mistakes that coaches will make with young teenage athletes is cranking them up too fast. When 1 to 2 pound jumps on a lot of these lifts is more than sufficient. And then things like switching them into triples sooner than grinding away the 5s, just due to the physiology differences between men and women, right? So the expectation is they need to take a very slow progression. Like get them to get them to 1 pound jumps on their presses very quickly. Get them to 2.5 pound jumps on their squats and deadlifts very quickly. And now take this into effect too. That's for most young teenage women. I have worked with some in the past who carry a little bit more muscle mass. They're more athletic, and you can be a little bit more aggressive with them too. So the expectation is just you have to go very, very slow with them and know that a 1 pound jump for them on their press is like a 5 pound jump for a lot of fully grown men on their press. Okay. Question from Goblet Squat. If you could only do one, would you press or would you bench? My personal take, this is my personal take, it's because I'm a poverty bencher, is I would press. But then from a coaching perspective too, like if I could only coach lifters with one of them, it would also be the press. Because again, it's where the difference with the bench press is you're laying down. So the kinetic chain is short. The kinetic chain on the bench press is from your shoulders to the back of your shoulders against the bench to where the bar is. Versus in the overhead press, you're standing. So that kinetic chain is down from your feet all the way up to where the bar is locked out over your head. So you're involving a lot more muscle mass and a lot more balance and a lot more skill with the strength acquisition that you're getting on the overhead press, as well as working a lot of the upper body, the shoulders, the chest, the traps, all of that. So I find that it would be a lot more useful to get good at lifting heavy shit over your head versus laying down on your back and bench pressing something away from you. Again, longer kinetic chain. You might use a little bit less weight, but there's a lot more skill involved with the overhead press, balance and all that. So when you do acquire that strength with it, it's going to be a lot more useful to you in daily life versus just pushing something away from you. How fast does strength degrade after a short layoff? Seems like it goes fast as an old dude. Yeah, it goes pretty fast, depending on the magnitude of your layoff. A lot of people who train consistently, if they take a week off and then they come back and they kind of ramp back up, that fatigue kind of dissipates and they recover and they end up coming back stronger. So for like small term layoffs, it doesn't really affect you at all. Now, if you're going to take like 2 months off, it's going to go pretty fast. But here's the thing. If you have spent the time of training to get really, really strong, you've changed your DNA, you've changed your physiology, you've changed the amount of muscle mass you have, you've changed your bone density, there's a ton of adaptation that you have created by going through that process of getting stronger. Here's what's going to happen when you take some time off. Yes, you'll detrain quickly. Neurologically, right? If you take 2 months off from training and you finished with 405 by 5 by 5 on the squat, and you take a couple months off, you're going to have a hard time doing like 315 for 5 when you come back. It's going to suck, but you'll probably be able to do it. So I would expect, depending on how long you take off, a few weeks, you're going to have like a 10% strength reduction. Anything longer than that, and it's just going to progress. But your baseline will always be higher because you went through that process, which is why you always see like the guys who are really strong and active in their 20s. Maybe they spent a ton of time in the gym and then they have a family, kids, job, and, they waste their 30s and they don't train. Well, by the time they're in their mid 40s and they come back to training, they always progress quickly because even that strength that they built back in the day, it comes back faster than somebody who was previously untrained. So I'm going to venture to say the more trained you are, the less time off is going to affect your strength. You'll come back to a higher baseline and you'll be able to ramp back up faster. If you haven't gone through that process, I almost think, say like you just do like a 6-month training and then you take 3 months off, you're going to go back to like zero. But somebody who's trained hard for a decade, they take a few months off, they're not going to fall back near as bad. I think that a lot of people think that if they have to take a month of their 2 training off, that they are just going to lose everything. And I found that that's not really the case. And in short term, oftentimes you end up being stronger. So it goes fast, but it always goes to a baseline that's higher if you've been doing what you need to do properly. Okay, so alrighty, hopefully that answers all of my 5 questions that I wanted to answer here, and I will chat with you guys next time. Also, I got shamed for the audio last time, and hopefully this little lav mic that I feel like a faggot wearing makes it sound better.